Back to one of the top stories of the day, the announcement of the by-election results that have just been announced. Our reporter Malungelo Booi is there covering that story for us and joins us live. A very good afternoon to you, Malungelo. I just had a really good chuckle at the end of that media briefing where the issue of mail-in ballots was spoken about, the fact that there are no mail-in ballots there that are being awaited, and thus the results are pretty much final for South Africa's by-elections.
That's right, Tammy. In fact, if we go through those numbers, I'll just give you a national picture, really. There were about 95 wards that were contested, and the African National Congress really retaining about 64 wards and lost 2 wards and won about 6 new wards. The Democratic Alliance retaining about 14 wards, losing about 9 wards and won 2 wards. I mean, when you study these results, Tammy, the Democratic Alliance appears to be the biggest losers in these by-elections, and most of the wards that it lost, those wards went to smaller parties. But I want to bring in Janet Love. She's the vice-chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission. Thank you so much for your time. I think our starting point really should be on the voter turnout, which was at 37.83%. To me, that does not look like a much higher number.
So it's in absolute terms, it's certainly not a high number, but as we know, we have to look at this in relation to patterns of voting processes, first of all. Secondly, we have to recognize that this was an extraordinary event in that we had many by-elections happening on the same day, right across the country, and yet the day was not a specific holiday or something like that. And so we also had terrible weather in parts of the country. So in the light of that and the fact that this percentage accords with what we've seen for by-election turnout over the last 5 years, or well since the 2016 elections, what we're saying is that it falls within that average. I think we all know that as a country there is huge significance and importance in everybody mobilizing for the greatest participation possible in an electoral process, in registration processes. And so we would want to say to everybody as a country, we need to make sure that we get this message out, why we appreciate so much what the media has been doing, to make sure that people recognize all electoral processes, whether they're by-elections or national events. So, yes, we would always like to see it increase. Do we feel that this was negative in the light of the experience in the last 5 years for by-elections? No, it was very much within the average.
In terms of disruptions, I mean, how much role then would the disruptions play in people coming out to vote?
Look, as we indicated, we saw a really very peaceful process. We saw citizens who came to vote really compliant and accepting of the kinds of requirements that we have for the COVID pandemic. So in that sense, we can say we really saw an overwhelmingly peaceful and cooperative kind of engagement that you would want and expect of a democracy. The reality is that we can't at any point be complacent by saying because that happened, poor conduct, which did happen in a couple of wards, is something that we will turn and look in another direction. We can't accept that anybody's right to vote is impeded by actions of other citizens. This is in no shape or form because we don't respect people's right to protest. Absolutely we do, whatever the issues are at stake. But it cannot be at the expense of democracy and people's right to vote.
I do want us to talk, though, about the voter turnout, which was about 75.29%, which was recorded in Ward 4 in Port St. John's. Do we know how large that ward was?
Look, I don't certainly have, unfortunately, the figures here, but it is a really, really positive turnout. And I think that what we can say in that particular ward is that there's clearly been a level of activism and mobilization, not just by political parties and not just by staff of the Commission, but also by the community organizations. I think local radio stations have played a very important role, and we really do appreciate that. So it's that combination, and you can see that it's possible to achieve those kinds of high levels of turnout. It's not something that we have to sort of say should be only in one fantastic turnout of one ward. We're hoping that this is something that almost in a spirit of competition, other wards will recognize is really important.
I suppose then that you are then preparing for next year's local government elections. This was a sort of like an exercise for you.
Absolutely. Next year's elections will obviously have to take on board a lot of the precautions and processes that we have to put in place in relation to COVID. But I think also it gives us a sense that our citizenry is still very committed to the democratic process, and we really do encourage that.
All right, thank you so much, Janet Love. She's the vice-chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission. Tammy?